Well, let's get more now. I'm joined by BJ Martino, who is a Republican pollster and president and CEO of the Tarrance Group. He joins us now from Virginia in the United States. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That was the longest ever State of the Union address delivered by President Trump last night. He hailed what he said were massive achievements during those 107 minutes. Some people called it a combative State of the Union address. What tone do you think the president wanted to strike?
Well, first and foremost, if there's any questions about his endurance, he put those to rest with that address last night. But the tone he struck was one going into midterm elections in which Republicans are going to be defending their majorities in the House and the Senate. And he did a couple important things. First and foremost, he reminded voters of some of the economic accomplishments of the last couple of years, including things that are going to be coming up, especially as we approach tax time. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. And it's going to be important to remind voters that these things they're feeling during tax time and seeing in their tax returns are all thanks to what Republicans have accomplished. The second thing he did is set a very modest agenda for this year. It is a midterm election year. You don't expect a lot to get done in Congress this year, but he put a couple things in Congress that he said are his priorities. And then finally, the combative tone. Yes, he held Democrats' feet to the fire. He reminded voters about what things were like under the Biden administration, and clearly highlighted the fact that Democrats' agenda is to take things back to the way they were. And you can see this in a lot of the polling data that exists in terms of trust for parties on the issues. Democratic favorability, Democratic trust is lower than that of Republicans right now. And setting that contrast, establishing that are all things that are setting up successes for Republicans in midterm elections. So that combative tone was not one about needing to have great legislative accomplishments this year. It was setting up the campaign fights that are to come.
Okay, I mean, we heard President Trump in that address saying things like, our nation is back. This is the hottest country in the world. We are doing really well. But do you think all of that is felt by ordinary Americans? I mean, is that how people on Main Street would see things, do you think?
There is a lag, and you see this in polling, and I've been doing this for 25 plus years now, that voters' personal feelings about the economy and how they are experiencing it tend to lag behind a lot of the economic indicators. Voters aren't sure that things are better. It takes a few months, up to 6 months oftentimes, for voters to catch up to where those indicators are telling us that things are. So it's not surprising. And it's that not only that the president is touting these things, but it's not surprising that voters' attitudes quite are lagging behind where the reality is. It does put Democrats in the unenviable position of having to root against the economy over the next 6 months leading into the fall, whereas the Republican mission is going to be continue to talking to voters about accomplishments, telling them that when good things happen that they feel, such as in their tax returns, that remind them that that is thanks to Republican accomplishments. But also listening. It is going to be important for Republicans not to get too far out ahead of where voters are. It's totally appropriate for the president to be out in front and cheerleading. But when talking to voters, every Republican has to understand that voters aren't quite there yet.
Right. I mean, according to the polls I've looked at, President Trump's approval rating looks like it's hovering around the 40% mark. Perhaps you've seen some different polls. If you have, let me know. Is that something to be worried about for the GOP going into these midterms?
Well, there's good polls and bad polls, and the average right now is around 43% for the president, and his normal watermark is about 45. So we're within range of that. I think the important thing going into these midterms is not necessarily where he is here, but where is those image ratings and that job approval going to be in the mid to late summer, once voters have begun to feel some of in their own lives, the economic benefits that are coming their way. I think for Republicans, it's also about making sure that the base, who is still very foursquare behind the president, is energized going into these elections. So a lot of what you heard last night was not just about talking to those middle who aren't unsure, maybe unsure or slightly disapproving of the president right now because of some of those economic feelings, but it's also making sure that the Republican base is energized and understands the stakes that are at play and is motivated to turn out when we get to the fall.
I'm sure you were watching that State of the Union address, or most of it, given that it was pretty long, wasn't it? It got quite rowdy at some stages as well. There were cheering Republicans, which I suppose is normal, heckling Democrats. I mean, is that new? Has American politics entered a new phase, or has it always been a bit like that?
It's always been a bit like that, not necessarily in the State of the Union. There have been events in the past, but I think that underlines, the nature of where our politics is in the country right now. It is going to be rowdy, and the president feeds on that. He didn't shirk away from continuing to deliver his lines when you had Ilhan Omar and others screaming back at him from the seats. I think that actually ultimately shows voters and shows our base again how passionate the president is about this, and ultimately will become a good thing for our base going forward in the elections.
Okay, and going back to those elections, we've got, 7 months to go until, a bit less than 7 months till the midterms. I mean, are you sort of the view that the GOP is going to manage to maintain its control of both houses of Congress?
Well, certainly history suggests that the party in power loses seats. That hasn't always been the case, but historically, that is the fact. It is going to be a challenge in the House, and we certainly have work, and there are a number of seats at play right now. But Republicans have a story to tell. They have accomplishments to tout. And it's not only accomplishments that happen at the federal level in terms of legislation, but it's accomplishments that these members have been doing and working for their folks back home. And I think you're seeing a lot of Republican incumbents in particular talk about the impacts they have had for their district, not just with legislation, but bringing home different projects, working for their constituents. So you're going to see all of that in these elections. The Senate, as opposed to the House, is in better shape for Republicans. Some Democrats say there's some opportunities there, but all the numbers suggest the Senate's in a lot better shape. But the House is going to be competitive going into the fall. And the president really was launching the campaign season with that speech last night, and in many ways giving Republicans a roadmap for how to go and talk to voters. Talking about those accomplishments, particularly with the economy as voters begin to experience them. Go in and say, we have a couple more things that we're doing. The job's not over yet. We're still working on some of these issues. And then finally, delivering the contrast that the alternative is going back to the way things were in 2024 and reminding them how you felt under Biden. And that's the direction Democrats want to go. So in many ways, the State of the Union, when you see that sort of combative nature, when you see that tension in the gallery and the give and take from those in the seats, just because this was a campaign speech. This was launching really the campaign season, and we're going to November. It's a little under 9 months right now, although early voting and absentee voting starts the process a little bit early. But this is the kickoff. This was the kickoff of the 2026 campaign season for real that the president delivered last night.
Yeah, indeed. It is 9 months, not 7 months. It's, of course, in November. Thank you very much indeed. BJ Martino, Republican pollster, thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get more now on President Trump's State of the Union address, in particular the references he made to Iran during that address. We're joined now by David Sedney, who is the former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under President Obama. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Foreign policy issues in the State of Union address don't usually get too much attention, do they? But do you think it's fair to say that Iran was the main focus when it came to foreign policy matters in that address?
Well, I think it's fair to say that Iran got some mention, but in fact, most people in the United States, certainly analysts of foreign affairs, were very disappointed at how little Trump said, how vague what he said was, and that he didn't really give any indication of why he had amassed such a large force in the Middle East and what the triggers might be to use that. Earlier on that same day, Secretary of State Marco Rubio conducted a closed-door briefing of the 8 key leaders of the U.S. Congress, the so-called Gang of Eight. Coming out of that, Senator Schumer said that if President Trump is going to do anything, he's going to have to explain it to the American people first. A lot of people thought he was going to do that last night. He didn't. There was really nothing in there to assuage the concerns of many in the United States who feel that President Trump doesn't have a clear objective, doesn't really know what he's doing when it comes to the Iran relationship. So I think his remarks last night left more questions than they gave answers.
Yeah, I mean, he said his preference is for diplomacy. He also accused Tehran of having sinister nuclear ambitions. But beyond that, you're saying no other clues as to where things might head to from here, not even in his tone?
Not that I or anyone that I know of or have read about can see. But we do have these talks tomorrow with his special envoys, his son-in-law and his friend Steve Witkoff. The Iranians have said they're going there ready to negotiate. So I think we'll just have to see what comes out of those. The Iranians, of course, objected to the way President Trump characterized Iran as a terrorist state and having nuclear ambitions, but that was sort of pro forma back and forth. I didn't see anything new, either what Trump said or the Iranian response so far.
We're in a situation where there are 2 aircraft carrier groups that have been deployed to the region. One's arrived, one's about to arrive. Do you think it's an option for President Trump to have deployed that amount of hardware and then not use it?
Oh, I think it's very much an option. President Trump will not want to use force, especially as in this case, as he has reportedly been warned by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that there would be U.S. casualties if there was such an attack. And so far, President Trump has been very fortunate. His overseas adventurism has not led to American casualties. So if an attack did take place and there were serious casualties, he faces a big attack from his right-wing base that don't want any foreign involvements. So he really does not want to use this force, but he wants to use it to try and intimidate Iran and get some kind of better deal. But again, it's not really clear what that deal means, what that deal would entail and how it would be carried forward. So we will have to really see what happens on Thursday. I will point out that President Trump said the other day that he had a deadline of 10 to 15 days. President Trump's past behavior is that whenever he sets a deadline that is squishy, like 10 or 15 days, it always gets extended. So I think that we will see a lot more play out before there's any military action by the United States.
But just drawing on the fact that there was a deal in place, the JCPOA deal that was struck just over a decade ago. I mean, what would President Trump have to extract from the Iranians by way of concessions for him to be able to then step back from the military option?
Well, President Trump, of course, pulled out of the JCPOA when he was elected the first time and made clear then and continues to make clear that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. The Iranians' position has been that their nuclear program is for civilian purposes and that they have no intention, and the Iranian foreign minister repeated this yesterday, they have no intention of building a nuclear weapon. But all the intelligence is that what they are doing creates the building blocks for that. So it would have to be for Iran to give up some of its nuclear material, I think, maybe all of it. It might have to submit to very intrusive inspections by the United States, not by the IAEA, which President Trump does not trust. So it would be a very heavy lift for Iran to go with that level of derogation of its sovereignty that would be required to satisfy President Trump. And I think that's been the key so far. Iran has not been willing to be as open as possible. But the regime is under a lot of pressure, not just from Iran, from the U.S. military, but also from the demonstrations in the streets, the continuing fallout from their killing of thousands of their own citizens. This is a country where many of the people who are demonstrating against the regime are calling on the United States to attack. There are students who are saying we want the United States to bomb the regime. So this is a complicated situation for the Iranian leaders to try and navigate.
Right, and President Trump will have been taking into consideration the opinions of people like the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who have made no secret as to what their preferred course of action would be. I mean, there are those in the administration as well, Iran hawks, who say it's now or never. Now is the time to be doing this and to be taking military action. How loud are those voices, do you think? And do you think President Trump will be taking those opinions well into consideration?
Well, those voices are very loud. Senator Graham from South Carolina is perhaps the loudest one, but there are others as well. As you say, Iran hawks who believe we should take some action. The problem that the Iran hawks have is they have no real solution as to what comes next after a major attack by the United States. There's no intention of putting U.S. troops on the ground. There's no intention of assuring that any follow-on regime, if this regime were to fall, would be any better. It might be a worse regime. So they have a lot of uncertainty on their side. At the same time, President Trump has very loud voices in his own party, in his own support, his MAGA base, who want no foreign adventures, who want no wars. And if an attack precipitates significant U.S. casualties, those voices will get even louder. So yes, there is pressure to go now, but there's also pressure not to go at all. Israel is third factor. The Israelis want more than just an end to the Iranian nuclear program. They want an end to the Iranian ballistic missile program, an end to the Iranian drone program, because those are the weapons that threaten Israel. In the past, President Trump has shown himself willing to really put the U.S. interest in stopping the nuclear program ahead of the Israeli interest in stopping the ballistic missile program of Iran. There's a tension there between Israel and the United States, and how that gets resolved is really yet to be seen.
Just turning our attention back to the talks in Geneva, talks that are going to be held tomorrow. Are you hopeful anything's going to be achieved there? I didn't detect a great deal of optimism in your tone when those talks were discussed earlier in our conversation.
I think both sides have an interest in having enough progress to continue the talks. I would be surprised if there was a final resolution of the issues in those talks, but I think both sides want to come out of the talks with enough from the other side so they can continue discussing, and so that military action is not the preferred step for the United States, and that the regime doesn't have to face the consequences of that military action. So I would expect some progress, but not enough to fully resolve the situation.
Okay, so just to wrap up, and in just a few seconds, if you don't mind, you do not think that the signs are there that military action is imminent in this particular moment?
If you say it's imminent in the next 24, 48, 72 hours, then no, I don't. But a lot does depend on what happens if the talks break down, if the Iranians walk out of the talks. Then I think it's possible that President Trump, in some kind of fit of pique or anger, could order an attack right away. So you can't, with President Trump being as volatile as he is, you can't exclude the possibility that he might just go ahead and order an attack, even if his advisors didn't want him to. So I can't say there won't be, but I think the most likely course is that there will be enough progress to put off a day of reckoning.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your time. So we're going to have to leave it there. David Sedney, former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under President Obama. Thank you for your time, sir.